What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boys over here at Three Man Weave. I'm your co-host CJ here with my lovely co-host ZD on this beautiful Wednesday night. How are you doing tonight, ZD?
I'm in the building, bro. I'm above ground. I'm feeling good. We got a lot of good stuff to talk about, brother. Bradley Beal, man, bro, it's about time.
About time.
We got the offseason files for the Golden State Warriors, which is going to be a fun ride as well. Talking about Embiid a little bit, Wemby as well. We have a good little slate for the podcast, so I'm excited to get into it. We were chopping it up for like 20 minutes. You were working on the Twitch thing, trying to upload this dang thing to Google Drive,
Yeah,
but
bro.
it's all good, brother.
Yes, sir.
Cloud storage is crazy.
Yeah, crazy, bro. Tech is wild, man. It's crazy. The
Wild.
fact that we're able to do this, like virtual.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's
Bro, just
insane.
virtual, like running it on OBS, just
hmm
getting it done. So I'm excited, bro. We got a good podcast to chop it up about. So let's get into it, man.
Yeah,
You
man.
ready?
Yeah, let's start it.
How you doing?
I'm doing great, bro. Like I talked to you a little earlier. Went to the gym, feel good. I'm off these next couple of days, so ready to get my weekend started, quote unquote. Because I don't work on Monday through Friday, so I just kind of whatever they give me, I have off. So today was my Friday essentially. So I'm excited, bro. Ready to chop it up about this news I just broke about Bradley Beal and like you said, Wemby and even Embiid. There was an article that dropped about him. Excited to kind of talk about all this stuff that's going on and then get into the offseason files with the Warriors.
Come on now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, let's stay in the West, brother. Bradley Beal getting bought out by the Phoenix Suns and going to the Clippers on that 2 year, $11 million deal. Um, First look, first thoughts. I seen Shams broke the news, and obviously I know I was feeling it. I was like, I think CJ likes this move. I like it
I do
for
too.
both teams. I think it benefits the Suns in a lot of contractual ways. We don't even have to go into details with that. A lot of people aren't necessarily here for the numbers, but you said this earlier to me. I didn't know this, but supposedly they're going to be paying Bradley Beal 19 million
Yeah.
until 2029, which is called dead money. Whenever you have a player that's not on your roster and you're paying them, it's called dead money.
hmm
And hence the fact they're not on the roster, so they're dead.
Right.
But Bradley Beal is no scrub, bro. I think the Clippers in Balmer, honestly, I think it was Steve who did this, but he pounced on that opportunity, bro.
Oh yeah.
Their balance sheet is interesting, but they have $11 million to give to uh, a past NBA All Star, somebody who averaged 30 points for 3 straight years and was getting to a lot of buckets in Washington. And I know the Wizards faithful will never forget the Bradley Beal, John Wall duo that they had in Washington, bro. But over this last year, it just hasn't worked out schematically. I think he's been third, fourth fiddle at times, depending on who's hot, who's not. Being behind Kevin Durant and Devin Booker is very difficult. I think he kind of lost himself in the offense. He had a couple good games last year, though. You would get 18, 20, 21 points. I think he had a really good game against the Clippers, actually, which might have been why they thought that Bradley could provide some support to them, which is interesting, bro. Because I know he had a few games where he looked like the Bradley Beal from a couple years ago, and I know that that's still the type of player that he is and his capability. And obviously, when you have Mike Budenholzer, he's going to be focused on getting Devin Booker and Kevin Durant involved in the offense, and he wasn't always concerned with Bradley Beal's touches. I know his agent said that they were okay with this buyout because of the lack of offensive availability within that offense. I know it was going to be different this season with the acquisition of Jalen Green and the departure of Kevin Durant, but ultimately Bradley Beal felt like LA was a better spot for him just based off of fit and what he could provide to them on offense. And he's a defensive liability, but the Clippers are good on defense, man. I don't think going to the Clippers for him is a bad decision because they'll be able to hide his defensive liability. So yeah, bro. James Harden, Kawhi Leonard got a running mate. Kind of similar to Paul George in terms of the mid-range three-point scoring. Obviously, Paul George is a different type of player, much taller. But Bradley Beal has similar scoring traits to PG for sure. So I'm really excited to see how this ends up. I think Phoenix benefits more here though, just because they do clean up their books and they try to get out of that second apron moving towards 2030. And obviously, they don't have control of their picks. This isn't a massive move for their future, but it is for their financial future. It doesn't necessarily add a player that's going to provide dividends or anything like that, but they do clean up their balance sheet moving forward. And then for the Clippers, one game, they were a series, a couple players away. They made the Norman Powell move, which was questioning, but they got somebody who I would argue is better.
Yeah.
Bradley Beal is definitely a better offensive player than Norman Powell is, and we haven't seen that over the last year. I would argue Norman Powell probably had a better year last season,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that Norman Powell is a better player. And so the Clippers, man, just swept under the rug, came out of nowhere with this one. I was not expecting him to go to LA, but it makes sense, the fit and everything like that. So yeah, I'm not shocked Matt Ishbia decided on this today. I think he spoke with his board of advisors and the people on his internal team, and they came to this conclusion that like it's not even personal with Bradley Beal. He performed at a decently high level. It's just not going to work here, which is like, that's okay.
Right.
I think that it's better to kind of cut bait before you pretend that this is a championship roster. But those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, I have the, same logic and same thinking that you have. I think it's great for both sides in different ways, of course. I feel like with Phoenix, like you said, just being able to get off that hefty contract was really the main thing, and I'm glad that they actually did it. It's something that, we were talking about earlier. We're surprised they didn't really do it early, like sooner, but the fact that they did it just kind of shows what direction they're trying to go in. I feel like that was always something. The Suns faithful were kind of, man, what are we gonna do with Bradley Beal? Obviously, we can't. He has a no trade clause, and he's only gonna get traded to a team that he wants to go to. But the fact, sorry, the fact that you're able to get off that hefty contract, just kind of, like you said, doesn't. It's not helping because they don't have their
Roster.
picks, yeah, their roster
Yeah.
wise, but it's helping with their books, and I feel like that's something. The more that we're kind of doing these off-season files that we're realizing, kind of diving deeper into, but a lot of casual fans or people that just watch basketball just
Aren't paying
yeah,
attention
aren't
to.
really paying
Yeah.
attention to. But I think it was great in that aspect for the Suns. And for the Clippers, like you said, with them losing Norman Powell, they kind of fill that void that was kind of left in his about to be left in his absence. He's pretty much able to do what Norman Powell was Norman Powell was doing for them, but like you said, we haven't seen that as of late. But I just think it's also the situation that was in Phoenix. I just don't think, like you said, the play styles of all the players that were already on there, including Bradley Beal, just didn't mesh really well. But I think he's in a perfect spot for him to, I'm not going to say average 30, but I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of has a bounce back season in a sense, probably like maybe 20, you know what I mean? I wouldn't be
20.
surprised.
Yeah.
Like I could see that from him just because, that's the type of player that Bradley Beal is. And I think a lot of people kind of forget how good he was, when in Washington. So I think it was great for both teams. I, like you said, was very surprised that he went to the Clippers, but they saw that opportunity. Like you said, I think he had a great game against them this past season, and just kind of saw the capabilities that he still has. Like you say, he's a former All-Star player, and I think he, maybe not being an All-Star this year, but he's gonna have contribute to a lot of wins for the Clippers. I could see
Yeah.
that in the future. Like you said, defensive liability, but the Clippers are already great defensively. They have versatile wings. They obviously have Kawhi and James Harden leading the pack, but I think that's a perfect situation for him just because obviously Harden is a ball dominant guard, but Kawhi can kind of get his when he needs to. And I think, Bradley Beal being there, that third option, maybe second option depending on the day. I think that's a perfect situation for him. Kind of go out there, do his thing, do what we know that he can do. And that's get buckets. So I'm excited. They obviously they got John Collins as well. So Clippers are they're making some moves, man. Like you said, we haven't really dove deep into all their books and stuff. So interested to see what that's gonna look like. But I'm not surprised, just more definitely was okay. Like they're definitely trying to make some moves, heading into this upcoming season. So shout out to both teams. I feel like they both benefited in different ways, but Suns were able to get off that contract, and the Clippers were able to get another guard that can score to kind of fill that void that Norman Powell left in his absence. So super excited. Like you said, it was really unexpected, but not surprising at the same time. Just I think going to LA, I think that was probably the shock, but it makes sense for both teams. So it's a incredible trade or buyout that turned into
I
a
out.
signing. Yeah,
Yeah, fine. Starting lineup for the Clippers, man. What does that look like? It's James Harden,
mm-hmm,
probably Bradley, it's
mm-hmm,
probably Kawhi.
yep. Would it
There are
be
four.
would it be
Yeah, well,
Collins?
I think it's gonna be JC and that's gonna be Zoo.
Zoo? Yeah, that's a decent roster.
It's pretty good.
Yeah,
It's pretty good. We'll see. I don't know if it's finals esque, but that's what they're gonna put out on the court for sure. And the Clippers showed us a lot
yeah,
in the second half of the year last season. They
definitely.
won a lot of games. They were one of the best teams in the NBA the second half of the year, and so we've already seen what they can do from a roster standpoint without Beal. They had Powell, like you mentioned, but they've replaced that void in his absence pretty immediately.
Yeah,
And again, the Clippers have been waiting to get to the finals, baby. They still haven't done it yet.
yeah,
They're always going to be scratching and clawing to reach the apex just because they haven't ever held the Larry O'Brien. So we know they want to get back to competing. We know Bradley Beal gives them an opportunity to do so, and three man we boys are excited to see where that turns up. We'll have to see where the Clippers land in our predictions for next year, but
definitely.
most likely they'll be top 15 for sure. It's the top half of the league.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I agree as well, man. Like you said, they were already a really good team without these acquisitions that they got, and obviously losing people, but they got someone right back that does has the same type of game or impact
They're a
on the
top
game.
10 team for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Probably like top 10, maybe like 10-9. But
yeah.
we're going to go out east for a second, bro. Talk about Embiid. Yeah, bro. I seen that article, man. Thought it was interesting. We were talking about James Harden. I think this is a perfect segue. But Joel Embiid, brother, just Philadelphia 76ers are kind of in an interesting spot. They drafted VJ Edgecombe, which I would say is an immediate bright spot. They did not lose out on their lottery hopes. We saw Daryl Morey speak about this in a uh, post draft, I guess. What's whenever they put post lottery pick conference, you could say whenever they actually got the pick officially, and he was like, "I breathed a sigh of relief, man, because I know the Philly faithful, the fans, they've been wanting us to get somebody young, somebody impactful. We're gonna be able to make that decision." They went with VJ, but I think they're in an interesting spot because of two reasons. One, Philly hasn't been super competitive since Allen Iverson. And I know that haunts them, right? They haven't been to the finals since then, and I know they want to return. But two, they're split down the middle in terms of old veteran players who are really good, who are still all stars, and then younger talent who's they're trying to develop, who are honestly already, Tyrese Maxey's developed. I would say, Jared McCain is pretty damn good. Q Grimes is good, right? They got a lot of different players on that roster right now that are in different spots in their career,
Mm-hmm.
and they're gonna have to figure that out. Joel Embiid is in an interesting spot because we have not seen him play at full strength for the last two seasons. Going back to last year's Olympics, if you guys don't remember, he had that performance against Nikola Jokic for the ages, putting up 17, 18 points. I think he had 22 points in an Olympic game against Jokic, which was like really great to see. That was the last time I saw Joel Embiid play at 100%.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I brought that up. That was the last time I've seen him do that. And it was for Team USA. It makes sense. He's given everything he got on that court, but really these last 8 to 12 months for him have been tough. And me and you have seen that. He hasn't been able to stay on the court. Batum mentioned something in this article that he saw his knee pretty much every single game the season before, and he was like, how is this guy still playing? And it kind of goes to show you what Joel Embiid has pushed through this entire time, being on the Sixers and being a part of the process and being their franchise player. And I think he's working on refining his leadership. They brought up the James Harden situation, which he said really hurt him. Daryl Morey and some guys on that roster blame him for what happened with James Harden. And he feels that that's not necessarily fair. And honestly, I agree with him. I don't really think James Harden made that decision with Joel Embiid in mind. He could have. I don't want to speak like I know JH, but I think knowing James Harden, he's more of a selfish kind of guy. He's really not thinking about other people, and just knowing based off what I've seen from his post game pressers, his MVP speech. That's just the type of player that he is. That's what the mentality I'm gonna go with, and so I feel bad for Joel Embiid in the situation, bro. I feel like he's been a franchise leading superstar for the last 4 to 5 years, and it hasn't paid dividends. They've tried to add certain pieces around him to make him better. I think Tyrese Maxey is Philadelphia's best piece right now. It's not even Embiid, just based off of the value, right? The injury proneness, just how old he is. He's definitely an aging superstar, but I'm excited to see what Philly comes up with next season. We haven't dove straight into their off-season files just yet, so we haven't talked about it on this show. But I don't want to spoil too much, but it's going to be an interesting highlight just because of all the types of players that they have, how they mesh. We'll see what the type of product they put out on the floor next season. I'm excited to see VJ. He should get a lot of run, but their starting lineup's going to look interesting, bro. I
Mm-hmm.
think they need to prioritize keeping Embiid healthy, and I think they'll be able to do so a little bit more than they were able to last season, just because I'm sure they won't start off as poorly as they did, and that'll give them a little bit more breathing room going down towards the end of the season. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't hit the games limit. I don't think Embiid is playing for accolades at this point. I think he's just trying to get to the playoffs, and they want him healthy for that. But this offseason is going to be a summer of refocusing, dialing back in, locking back in, and really getting on the same page as the front office and the other guys on that roster. I think Joel Embiid deserves a chance to compete at a high level. We saw what remember last year, I think it was Christmas, but what they did to the Celtics just tore them apart, bro.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we talked about that on Three Man, but I saw that and I was like, woo wee, because we talked about it
Yeah,
the
we
day
did.
when it happened. We
Mm-hmm.
talked about it. Me and you both said we were like, they could win, bro.
Yeah.
Just because if Embiid plays well, if guys are playing inspired, like the Sixers are just as good as the Celtics when everybody's playing well. So we saw that on Christmas, and that was really one of the last times I saw Embiid give effort too. And so it's just been up and down for him the last 8 months, like I had mentioned a few minutes ago. And I know CJ and I are hoping for him to turn that back around. We want to see the Sixers compete at a high level. The Eastern Conference is wide open as well. They're definitely one of the better teams in the East if they can stay healthy, if him and PG can. So we'll see, man. I know Embiid's in a tough spot, bro, but he deserves the world. And, CJ and I are wishing him the best. But ultimately, it's going to be a summer of, like I said, refocusing, locking back in, and getting on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, no, man, it's you said it, man. It sucks, the situation he's been in. I mean, obviously getting drafted, he was already injured, and then slowly recovering, getting playing sparingly each season, and then I think obviously winning an MVP is a accomplishment that majority of people would like to get in their lives, but I feel like that kind of him meeting that game requirement just because of his history on injuries and stuff. I feel like it kind of not his downfall, but it was kind of why he is where he's at.
Well,
Yeah, just
I agree.
because he sacrificed so much. I think he was trying to make a point, like prove a point to everyone in the league. Like I'm the best player in the league, and it was Jokic and Embiid for what 2-3 years, whatever it was, and it was always Jokic kind of surpassing him and stuff. But that year, I think that's it sucks because he was MVP of the league and then ended up I think losing in the first round, I think, second round, whatever it was. And, since then, kind of hasn't really been able to be healthy. And I think that, has something to do with it. Just meeting those game requirements it just takes a toll on his body specifically, but everyone, and I think
Yeah.
that's kind of been the thing with Joel. It's, if he can stay healthy. And at this point, like you said, I don't think he really cares about getting the accolades anymore, getting like the first team all NBAs. I think he's prioritizing, like you said. I mean, you brought it up in the article as well. Just a summer for him just to kind of reevaluate his situation and where he's at in his career, and that's fine. You don't need to get all these accolades. Of course, like people are going to talk about that whenever he's retired and stuff. But I think at this point, especially just where they're at, like you said, having such a weird duality for on their roster of young guys and
Word
old
for that.
veterans that are trying to, mesh and trying to essentially win a championship. And I think, you said it, we've been saying it since the offseason started. The East is wide open, so this is a perfect opportunity for them to do that. It's just if they as a group can stay healthy. I feel like that's the main thing. And, them starting off so slow this past season kind of put them in a situation where it's like, or what are we gonna do? And luckily, McCain started doing well, and then he got injured, and then Maxey, he was doing his thing, and then he got injured. So it was just an unlucky season for them, And I think that's kind of been the story of the Sixers since really, like you said, AI. Like when they made it to that
Yeah,
finals, like it hasn't really been. I don't think they made it to the conference finals since then. So, yeah, it's cool. It's dope. Hearing that that's kind of where his focus is at. Because I didn't even know about that article prior to you, reading the outline that you sent. And obviously, we talked about it before we started recording. But I like that, man. Like, and I think that's
dude,
fine. That it's okay for
I agree.
players to focus on what they're trying to accomplish. And for Joel, that's being successful in the playoffs. And it's just the situation the league's in right now. It's a perfect time to do that. Like you have your young guys that if he doesn't play as much games, but the games he does play, he contributes to winning games and being Joel Embiid. We know what he can be. So I think that's perfect situation for them. And it's going to be exciting to see how they kind of piece everything together, like you said, with the rookies and these young guys. And PG, I think he just got his surgery and his whole situation. So it's going to be very intriguing. I'm excited to see
Yeah,
what the Sixers can do, because they, when healthy, when they're clicking on all cylinders, they're one of the better teams in the league. Honestly, not even just the Eastern Conference.
100%.
So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
100%.
interesting, man.
Brother, I got a great question for you. So the NBA did a 75th anniversary team. We've gone through that on this show. They will do an 100-year anniversary team. Do you think Joel Embiid makes the top 100 players of all time?
Mm, that is a great question. I mean, yeah, I would say so. I would
I
say
agree.
so.
I think he'll be there still.
I don't see why he wouldn't, obviously, unless there's a game requirements. But I
Right.
doubt it. But just what
Nah.
his type of player he is and his impact on the game of basketball, I think it kind of speaks more than like what he's proven to us, I guess. And he's already proven enough, just his
Yeah.
whole situation. So yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I like that answer. I'm right there with you. I wouldn't. I guarantee you, if we did a poll today, a lot of those guys would say Embiid's still top five.
Yeah.
So that's why I like that. That was a firm yes. I agree with you. We'll see. In 20ish more years, but
Right.
wouldn't be shocked if we'll see Jokic, we'll see Luca, we'll
Mm-hmm.
probably see Shea,
Yep.
right? We'll probably see Embiid. Like guys that are hooping right now, you're gonna see. Giannis was already made on the list.
Yep.
There's a couple guys we got to add, but I think you're gonna see some of the best players ever in their decorated careers, and Joel Embiid is right there, dude. First team All NBA. Anytime he meets the game's limit now, and when he's healthy, and he's just the MVP candidate always. So shout out to Joel Embiid, man. Got the love over here at Three Man Weed, bro. We respect you.
Yep.
But there's another crazy alien above 7 feet on the Spurs, going heading back out west. But Victor Wembanyama has been cleared to play, man. How you feeling about that? Only played 105 minutes with De'Aaron Fox last season. I looked it up,
Man.
NBA stats. So barely got to play with his boy. How you feeling about that, CJ?
Uh, uh, excited, but as a Thunder fan, as someone that's in the Western Conference, just seeing what he was able to do in the limited amount of time that he played this past season, a little worried. You know what I mean? Because the Spurs are building. They're building a playoff contender, championship contender, and with him being back there, it's hard to really bet against him at any game. So I'm excited to see it because I feel like we kind of were lost of DPOY for him this season, potential All NBA type player. You know what I mean? So I'm excited as a basketball fan, but as a Thunder fan, I'm a little worried, bro. I'm not gonna lie, just because we know
Yeah,
his
man.
his impact, and we know the type of player he is, and he's shown us all in his short career so far, and the fact that he led the NBA in blocks and played half the season blows my mind to this day. And I'm excited, bro, because I just like, we love hoops, so regardless of what team they're on, what conference, like we just like to see the game played at a high level, and that's what he brings to the table every single game.
Brother, you're right on the money with that. Just to give some context to the situation, he was in the Shaolin Temple,
Yes.
changing it up, doing some things differently this off season, trying out synchronized swimming. He was at Summer League. He was with J Dub and Braun at Summer. Like he's been everywhere. Wemby is just a of the highest class athlete. I think San Antonio is super lucky to have him. I saw Jimmy High Roller video today that spoke about Cooper Flag, but
Mm-hmm.
they spoke about Wemby and what he's been able to do just in a short time. I think he's lived up to the generational label that he holds, and me and CJ both know that he's going to be in this league for years to come and be competing as long as he can stay healthy. I think the blood clot. You didn't say it, but it scared me.
Oh yeah,
Seeing that
100%.
when that news came out, people don't always come back from things like that, and that did put a worry into my heart about his future. And I'm glad to see him healthy. There's been a lot of things that have happened with the Spurs, bro. A lot of health issues. Greg Popovich most recently switching out for Mitch. I know Manu and all those guys, like they're still all around every single day. Dylan Harper was speaking about that too, but just having that veteran presence, I think, is going to be really important for them. Like you said, as they build towards a championship. And hey, they're in an interesting spot too with the roster. I'm not gonna lie, they're guard heavy. They got a lot of guys that can do a lot of the same things. They recently traded Malachi Brenham away to the Wizards, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, Devin Vassell, right? Keldon, right? De'Aaron Fox, now Dylan Harper. Like they have a logjam at guard. They're gonna have to figure that out. But Wemby's gonna be a constant. We already know what he's gonna provide. He's gonna provide spacing. He's gonna be doing one-legged threes and blocking every shot. He's just he's a generational player, bro. Like he's truly
100%.
to me and you. I have no worry saying that. I think Wembanyama could be a top 100 player as well. So
Yep.
I'm excited to see him back on the court. I am scared too. I will agree with you on that one, especially whenever he goes up against the Lakers, bro. We just will not have anybody to stop that. Anytime he plays against Bron, he usually torches us, especially from deep. But Wemby does this thing, and I think he's gonna get better at it. But he used to kind of hover around the three and do it. I don't think he's doing that shit no more, bro. I think
Nah,
he's
dude.
gonna do that a little bit, but he's gonna go down and paint, try to dunk on you, and try to make sure you remember that he's Victor Wembanyama. So I'm excited. I know Carlos is, man. Shout out Carlos. I know you
Shout out
watching
to
the show.
Los, yes sir.
Yes, sir, man. I know the Spurs faithful are excited. My boy Jennings is a Spurs fan, so he was texting me about it. Just, I mean, hey, they needed to see that headline before they could be happy, bro.
Right.
He's still got to get cleared, and yeah, I know the Spurs. It's go time over there in San Antonio, man. It's just it's it's tough because the Thunder exists, so you have to get through Oklahoma City, but they know they have a player that just nobody else in the league has, and they're gonna put full belief in him. He has the keys already to the franchise, and yeah, I'm excited for next season. I know what he did last year in the short amount of time was crazy. Leading the league in blocks, like we talked about it. Just he definitely would have won DPOY over Mobley. I hate to hate on Ev, but Wemby's winning DPOY if he meets the game's limit this year.
Yep.
So you can book that. It'll probably be a minus bet, but
Yeah.
you can take that confidently, bro, and you won't be feeling bad at all. So I'm excited, bro. I'm excited. I think Spurs are excited too.
Yeah, no, they gotta be, man. Especially the draft that they just had, the players that they got last season. Yeah, a whole full season of everyone together. Yeah, it's scary, bro. Like I said, I'm not a Spurs fan, but I'll admit that they're probably the one of the greatest franchises we have in this league, and they do it the right way. They build through the draft. They have a good culture. Yeah, it's hard to not like them is what I'm saying. Even me not liking them, I still do like them just because
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
there's no reason to not to, especially just their history, what they've been able to accomplish, having that dynasty and then getting Wemby. It's like it's crazy how the cards are dealt sometimes. But hey, shout out to San Antonio. You know they're building like we've been saying a championship contender, and you know I'm excited, man. Shout out to Wemby, man. I'm glad he's all good. He's clear to play. That was a great news to have, like you said, especially for Spurs fan, but just basketball fans in general, man. I feel like he's bringing excitement for bigs again, and it's kind of like we've been talking about it a lot, like bigs double big lineup is coming back, and we have these aliens that are in the league. It's
Yeah,
hard it's
bro.
hard not to like them.
100%. I think he is the epitome of an alien. They also got Luke Cornett, man. The
Yeah,
the Spurs are, yeah, they're moving,
they're
dog. They seem to be in the right headspace. They've actually dumped Zach Collins. I think he's on the Bulls now, but like they've made a lot of small moves that are going to prove dividends later. So shout out San Antonio, dog. Like you're saying, it's good for basketball when they're good. So
mm-hmm.
that's good. But you ready to dive into the Golden State Warriors, man? Take a peek into what they got.
Oh yeah, man, let's get into it, bro.
All right, bro. Yeah, way we do it on this show, man. We go through all 30 teams. We got the offseason files. So you're going to hear your favorite team pop up 100%. But we started off with the three franchise players that they're building around. We kind of move into their cap situation. And then we wrap it up with some strategic on the court improvements and off the court improvements if they can make any. Um, it's interesting, bro. The Golden State Warriors are in a peculiar spot. They are not in the best place financially. They aren't necessarily in aprons just yet because of the Jonathan Kuminga situation. We'll have to see what happens with that. He is an unrestricted free agent. He is the number one person on their bullet list, and honestly, would have been on this list that we're about to, talk about in this next second if the Warriors were able to sign him, but they haven't done so yet. But rolling right along, start off with the GOAT. I mean, one of the best shooters of all time, 3 pointers made leader or league history. Steph Curry, baby goat, light skin killer, 37 years old. He signed a 4-year, $215 million supermax a couple years ago with a 5th-year player option for $57 million, which he recently accepted. Steph Curry is the greatest shooter we've ever seen and continues to do it at age 37. Averaged like 25 last season on pretty good splits. He's the engine to Golden State's offense. We've seen his longevity play out his entire career. I mean, he's going to be a for lifer there. He always has been a Warriors player, but he's been their main guy for the last decade, and he is still their main guy. I just think it speaks to Steph's greatness, bro. Me and you both know that the Warriors are never moving away from Steph just because of the amount of winning that he's brought to that franchise, and he continues to do it at the highest level. And you really can't replace what he brings, right? His shooting, his spacing. He's still, what I will highlight is his strength and stamina. He's gotten a lot stronger, and he runs like I think he tracks some of the most miles of any NBA player in the league right now, just because of all the movement he does off of the ball. And I think that's just what makes him so dangerous is his range, but his ability to just run forever. And he's a stronger point guard who's an all-star caliber player, still at age 37, almost 38 years old. He's still going strong. And I know the Warriors faithful are super happy to have somebody like Steph Curry change the entire course of their franchise. No Steph Curry, no rings. We all know who their number one franchise player is. That doesn't even need to be said. This next guy they did acquire in a trade though this past season. And interestingly enough, is Jimmy Butler. And if you guys don't know, man, he's been a playoff killer. Played for the Heat. I would say it was the Heat's franchise player. The Warriors decided to get Jimmy. They moved Andrew Wiggins, a couple other pieces to make it happen. But the Warriors decided to get Jimmy as a running mate for Steph Curry. Me and CJ were both a bit skeptical when this move first happened, but they rattled off 15 straight wins. And clearly Jimmy Butler is a good fit with Steph Curry. I think it also goes to show you how great Curry is, but Jimmy Butler's been perfect. Getting to the free throw line, that's the number one thing I have in my notes. He boosted their free throw rate through the roof. They were at the bottom of the league before Jimmy showed up, and they moved their way to the middle of the pack just because of the amount of free throw attempts that Jimmy Butler draws. And I think that's really good to slow down the game and get their defense back set. Jimmy also averages 20, 25 points on a good night. He signed a 3 year, 165 million, or I think no, it was a 2 year, 110. He becomes an unrestricted free agent next season, I think. So he didn't want to go in there with too much commitment. He knew what was at risk, and we saw last season in the playoffs what happened when Steph Curry's not at the helm. I think Jimmy Butler's a really good player, but I don't think he can get it done without Steph Curry or another all-star player alongside of him. He's still a great two-way player, top 50 player that we have in the league, and him and Steph Curry give the Warriors a dangerous duo moving forward. The number is interesting. They're both getting paid $60 million. It's $120 million annually for that duo, and they're aging, which is not a plus. So I will say that's the only thing that hurts the Warriors' core right now is those two guys are older. I don't really see a future in which Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry are around for a long time, right? A decade, right? So these guys' contracts are really big. They do provide a lot of usage. They provide a lot of value to the Golden State Warriors offense, but I think moving forward they do need to become younger, and it's going to be something they have to address. But this next guy is not younger, and unfortunately, like I said, I would probably put Jonathan Kuminga here if he had been re-signed by now. But that also would have changed the Warriors' financial picture. So as of now, as of today, this is Wednesday, July 16th. They are building around Draymond Green, who is another defensive, just you could say aficionado. Man, he knows how to do it all. He's really not an offensive guy for them. He's more of their glue guy. He kind of hustles. He does all the dirty work. He's improved his shot a little bit, so he has become a better offensive threat. But as of right now, the Warriors are just interested in his defensive services. I think he's been a player who's had a lot of turmoil recently. I think he's on that 4 year, $100 million contract. It's not like he's on a massive contract to play defensive quarterback, but all of the baggage that Draymond Green comes with, is it worth it? Right, punching Jordan Poole, getting a bunch of texts, always on the edge of suspensions. He's kind of the emotional leader of the locker room, but that has its positives, but it also has its negatives. And so, moving forward, these three players, a combination of these three players. One, there's not a youth core around them that's suitable, but two, if you're gonna have aging superstars be your main core, you better make sure that you're right. And I just listed off their three main players, and I don't know if that's a finals team. I think the Warriors have a lot of work to do um, with their internal roster, but also just who they're choosing to build around. That's why it's interesting to me that they haven't made that move towards Kaminga, because that signals to me that they don't think that's a person that they can build around. And I think Jonathan Kaminga's so young. He has a lot of he has so much more upside than all three of these guys do. I would argue, other than Curry, obviously he's going to be around, but Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green can definitely be interchangeable, and I think they're just waiting for one of their younger guys to step up so they can start building around that person. But as of now, as of today, July 16th, those are the three players that we know the Warriors are building around. Now, CJ, would you like to get into their cap situation?
Of course. Yeah, so next segment that we usually have for the off-season files, we dive deep into their books. We look at their financial situations and constraints. With the Warriors, like ZD was saying, they're in a decent spot. Their payroll right now is 177.7 million. And for everyone that doesn't know the cap lines, the luxury tax is 187.9 million. The first apron, if you get to that point, is 196 mil, and then the second apron is 207.8 million. So the Warriors are either in the second apron or just barely under the first apron, depending on what happens with Kuminga. Like we said earlier, if they sign him, they are over. If a sign and trade is executed, they are also over. If he walks, they are just under both aprons. So the potential restrictions for everyone that doesn't know, they get no mid-level exceptions, no sign-in trades, and no aggregate salary trades allowed. So kind of like what ZD was saying, it really depends on what ends up happening with Kuminga. If Kuminga, like you were saying, we just talked about how if he did re-sign, he would be one of those three players, and I completely agree with you on that. He has a lot of potential. He's a wing that can kind of do a little bit of everything, But if they were to sign him, they would be in that second apron. So like I said, like you were saying, not the worst situation financially, but as I'm looking at the books and I talked to you about it earlier, they have a lot of cap holds on their salary cap, and it's like players that have been out of the league, like retired. They have Matt Barnes, they have David West, Jonas Direkbo, like they have a lot of Andrew Bogut. So don't
Yeah,
exactly know how that is working, but I think you were saying it's still money owed to those players. So not knowing how much they're getting paid and stuff, but it's kind of alarming to me because as we've gone through a lot of
100%.
these financial situations from each team, I don't think I've seen one up to this point that has had any, if not as much as they have. They have like a
As
solid
much as they
like
have,
15
you know,
players.
and to be honest with you, I did not know how many cap holds they had. That
Yep,
is alarming.
it's very alarming. That's why.
Because they haven't paid for those services yet,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting.
Very interesting. But other than
And
that,
those people were okay with that
yeah,
too. Like they had to be in agreement, but still, it's just
it's
sketchy.
it's very, yeah, just like I said, nothing I have seen up to this point. I think we're probably like almost halfway through a lot of these teams, maybe a little under, but not as much as cap holds that I've seen since we've been doing this. So, but besides that, for the most part, their financial situation is in a decent spot. They're not in the luxury tax yet. We'll see what happening with Kaminga, but more than likely they're going to be a first apron for the luxury tax. So, like you
Yeah,
said, it's not the worst situation, but definitely not the greatest.
yeah, dude. And like moving forward, they have to decide on what they want to do with Kaminga now.
Right,
Like it
right
should
now.
be, it should be, yeah. Like it's interesting that it's taken this long. The off season has begun, and we've seen already a ton of moves happen. I think it shows Mike Dunleavy's walking through this process with grace, and he's doing it thoroughly, right? Like he's not making a decision that could impact the future really badly. If they do sign Kaminga to a, let's say it's, I would say if they re-sign Kaminga, it's going to be a number that's between 18 and 23. I would be shocked if it's more than 23 a year, but if that is the case, it puts you in the second apron, like
Hmm.
you're saying, and that's for that roster. It's the same roster they had last year.
Right.
Again, CJ, you just brought up their cap situation, but you know what that means. They cannot add people.
Hmm.
So they lost Kevon Looney. They're looking to add Al Horford at a league minimum right now, and I think that's dependent on what happens with Kaminga. Their cap situation is very peculiar to say the least. Like you said, the cap holds. Uh, yeah, they just owe a lot of debt. It seems like their balance sheet wasn't super clean a couple years ago, and now they're trying to figure out a way to remove some of that situation. But hopefully they're not a second apron team. I was doing some research on Reddit too. Some of the Warriors faithful, they were a little worried about what was going to happen with Kaminga because they didn't feel like they're that roster. I think it's right. It's Healed, Pods, Trace Jackson Davis,
Hmm.
Curry, Butler, Kaminga, Quentin Post. They didn't re-sign GP2, which was interesting. They lost Kevon Looney.
Yep.
Um, but yeah,
Pods.
there's a lot of yeah. So like that roster, I don't know if can win you an NBA championship, especially in the Western Conference landscape right now. So they have to decide pretty quickly what they're going to do with their cap moving forward. But let's get into some of the on court improvements that I feel like they can make. And this is the number this from the top down. This is most important to like what I think is like, but I think they need to infuse their younger players with their older players. Like I said a few minutes ago, if they don't get Pods, Moses Moody, who we haven't spoke about, Kaminga going, they're cooked, bro. Like I love Draymond Green, I love Jimmy Butler, I love Stephen Curry. Don't get me wrong, but that cannot be your core moving forward, especially with the Thunder and the Spur and teams moving in a younger direction. Even like with the Mavericks, they kind of have a different future now with Cooper Flag there. So you want to be getting younger and not older, and it seems like the Warriors are taking some steps back with that. I think, excuse me, I think Steve Kerr is a bit reluctant to make some lineup changes that could impact the continuity of what the Warriors have built, the championship pedigree, right? That era with Curry, Thompson, and Clay. And I think their 3-and-D capability is limited a little bit when they have Draymond and Jimmy Butler out there. Those two guys are not 3-point threats. I think they need to be focused on spacing the floor. People who are 3-point threats are Pods, are Moody, sometimes Kuminga. Kuminga can shoot a little better. So I just think they need to infuse their younger guys with their older core to have any hope moving forward. And what that looks like again is, bro, you got to play Moses Moody, Podziemski, and Kuminga 25 minutes a night.
Hmm.
Like they need to be in the lineup. They need to be honestly, at times they need to be playing more than Draymond does, right? Like that's kind of what I mean. And I think Steve Kerr is a Hall of Fame coach. I think he's a great head coach. I don't think he'd be reluctant to make those decisions in game, but I feel like in the off-season format, it's a lot tougher to simulate what it's going to be like in a game. So I feel like he's telling the guys, "Yep, we're going to be running offense through Curry. We already know what we're going to do. This is going to be the starting lineup. Blah blah blah." I think they're going to be reacting more than preparing, and that's a bit
Hmm.
of an issue. So they definitely need to get younger. That's step one. Step two is prioritize their front court. We talked about it. Quentin Post, Trace Jackson Davis. I love them, but
Yeah.
not going to get it done. They've really lacked a big um, for a long
Shit, I was
time.
gonna
I
say
would say the
shit.
Warriors.
Damn near their
I
their
was gonna say
whole.
the Warriors have never had like a great like all star big. I think really since David Lee,
Right.
some sort of Andrew Bogut,
Bogut.
you could say, but like they've also been doing small ball and it's been working for them this entire time. And I think this is the first year where they need to look to invest into a center. And that's why I brought up Al Horford. If they do want to use that mid-level exception that's available currently because they're under those aprons, I think it should be used on Al Horford. He provides veteran presence, shooting. I think Al Horford's improved his 3-point shot by like 10%
Hmm.
since the prime of his career. So he definitely gives them an opportunity to space the floor. And he's kind of the only available option that I could see fit on the Warriors. I think they struck out with Ayton and some of the other centers, and it's left them with bare bones. And that's not necessarily good, but I think they need to prioritize building around their front court, and they need to figure out who are their main bigs. If that's Tracy Jackson Davis, great. If that's Quentin Post, great. We know Quentin Post can shoot that thing.
Hmm.
Maybe it might be Quentin Post, but you got to find somebody who can give you consistent minutes in that front court. Um, yeah, you got to have a big who's competent, especially in the NBA today. A lot of the finals teams that have won in the recent future have had a big, even like Al Horford, but Chet Holmgren most recently, just being a dynamic hybrid big, somebody who can shoot, defend the rim, and also be, somebody who doesn't mind battling with you on the boards,
Hmm.
like who wants to be, do all the dirty work and get dirty. I think Al Horford is a great example of that. But moving into the number three priority, they got to make on the court. They got to stick with the space and pace.
Hmm.
So we've talked about the Warriors and their offense. It's one of the most profound offenses in the NBA because it's ran through Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr is very peculiar about what you do. There's down screens, there's a lot of motion, not a ton of dribbling. I think they need to lean into that even more so this year. If they need to go small ball, that's cool, but prioritize spacing the floor and shooting threes and being the Warriors that we all know and love. I think they were the first team, them and the Rockets with Mike D'Antoni, but they were one of the first teams to really show that, hey, you should get up 63 three-pointer attempts in a game. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the Warriors should lean into jack and threes. I think at this point, they don't have a big right now. I don't know if they'll find that big, so they'll really have to lean into playing with a lot of pace, go quicker. I know it's tough because they got an older group of guys around Curry, but they still got to do so, man. They got to push the pace and they got to figure out a way to allow Curry to be that offensive genius off the ball. And I feel like the space and pace for the Warriors has definitely worked out really well over the last few seasons, and so I don't see a reason to deter from that. They don't need to lean into a defensive identity or anything. Like they need to put their foot on the gas with their offense. And then lastly, bro, they need to prioritize health. So we haven't seen Curry healthy for a playoff run in a long time. I think they just need to get to the playoffs, dude. They need to do everything they can to get their stars healthy. If that means Jimmy Butler and Curry don't go for accolades, so be it. But I think prioritizing playoff success is what the Warriors need to be worried about. especially with an aging core. It'd be one thing if you're the Pistons, right? Maybe you can get away with playing Cade for 75 games every year, but not if Steph Curry is 37, going on 38. Jimmy Butler's 35, 36 years old. Like those guys can't play a full season if you want to have a great playoff
Playoff,
run.
yeah.
And so they need to be invested into prioritizing health. And they have a great training facility. I know their trainers work really hard. They've gotten guys back a lot quicker on quicker timelines than normal. So, being able to kind of mitigate that high intensity switching and on defense and also their offense that they run, right? The pace and the space they're going to be running with, it's going to make guys tired. Guys are going to be gassed. They're going to need a rest. And if you're playing through Draymond Green, Jimmy Butler, and Steph Curry, I mean, my goodness, it seems like it's the average age of like 36 and a half. So, like, yeah, those guys aren't going to be able to play 35 minutes a night for 80 straight games. And I think that's the four main things that I have that the Warriors can do. And then, we like to give some off the court improvements that teams can make. I think it's about switching their brand, bro. It's a new era of basketball in Golden State. They're no longer that super team with Kevin Durant. They no longer have Klay Thompson and that championship pedigree. I think they do have to change the face of that franchise and not necessarily speak to their fans and say, "Hey, we're moving on from Steph Curry," but we're saying, "Hey, this is a new era with Steph Curry." These guys are going to be chess pieces on a chessboard. We're going to play around our king, even though the queen is the most powerful piece. But we're going to play around Curry, make sure that he's hooping. We're going to try to find guys that fit roles. We're not here to be the superstar, be the main guy we know who we're building around. And I think that's going to signal to the culture that the Dub faithful still got a chance. I feel like the Dubs have been quiet just because they haven't been winning, and that's good for me. I'm a Lakers fan, but for the NBA, it's always good to see the Warriors being good at basketball. And I think just switching up what they've been doing over the last 5 to 10 years would be really smart. Just letting the franchise know where they're going in the future and what that looks like. I think the Warriors have done a really good job building their franchise over the last decade. So I think their fans are very receptive, and they've they've won championships, man. Like, I don't think their fans are going to doubt any front office decision that's made. I just think that they have to rebrand themselves and prepare for the future, brother.
Mm.
Like, it's that simple. I think all of those points that we just made right there are great points for what they can do in the offseason. Like me and CJ said, man, they can't add a bunch of players. They don't have the money. So it's not a ton of roster things that they can do. If they were in the second apron, I would be trying to figure out how they could get out of there. So that's why, when we broke down Cleveland, there were some moves for them to make. But I think ultimately where they are, being a 300K under the first apron, they're in a spot where they either sign Kaminga, go fully into what their roster, what's developing, or they move on and they try to figure out the new era with Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler.
Mm. Yeah, so kind of like as you were talking, I was thinking of a question to ask you. I wanted to bring up, obviously, you said development of their youth. Who do you think is going to be that player to step up, or who do you see potential in that could kind of not take the helm, but kind of be someone that they can rely on for the foreseeable future? Moody.
Like that guy's been in the dark. He's an NBA champion. Anytime he goes out there, he's instant offense. Steve Kerr just doesn't play him a lot.
Yeah.
And I think Pods has gotten more opportunities than Moody at times. And I think that's interesting to me just because Moody is a very prototypical guy, can get to his spots, hit threes. For me, that's the dude who's got to step up. I think Kaminga's done a good job of stepping up, filling in when Curry's absent. But if there's anybody, man, I would love to see Moses Moody get more involved. I think he's a 15-point scorer off the bench. Even he doesn't even need to start. But I think if you play him 25 to 30 minutes a night, you can get 15 points out of him per night, and that's very hard to come by in a league that's filled with super polished guys and role players and superstars or role players. I think he's kind of in the middle of that, kind of Norman Powell, right? Just
Right.
waiting for his opportunity. Once he gets that, I think he's on go.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's got to be Moses Moody, brother.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's just because as we are talking about it, as where I think this might be the oldest three players that they're building around for a team, and the fact that they can't really add people. They have young guys, but hasn't really proven to us that this is who we're gonna focus on to build the team around. It's a very interesting situation to be in, especially like you said with Curry and Jimmy having such hefty contracts. It's kind of puts them in a bind in a little bit, and they don't really have much to work with, so they're relying on the development of their young guys, which isn't a bad thing. But some of these players have been in the league for 3-4 years now, and I think, like you said, it's just Steve Kerr just not really giving them the opportunity. So think that's something, like you said, that was your first point. They're gonna have to play them more, and hopefully they do, because like you said, I don't think this roster is gonna be a championship team. I mean, they could be potentially they'll make the playoffs, I think, but I don't think it'll be they'll have to rely on their bench really to kind of push them to that point, and then rely on Jimmy, Steph, and Draymond to kind of carry them in the playoffs, which that's what they've been doing for the past decade. Besides Jimmy, obviously, but it's a strange situation that they're in, because you have Stephen Curry, greatest shooter we've ever seen, and it kind of gives you that hope that, oh, we have him on our team, we could potentially win a championship every year, which it's a great thing. Don't get me wrong, but it could kind of be a bad situation because he can't do it by himself, and I think that's something
Exactly.
that we're starting to realize as of late. Besides the championship run that they had earlier this decade. But since then, he hasn't really had anyone to help him, and it sucks when you don't have the ability to be able to sign people or do these things, or you're not playing your young guys, so you can't really be mad that you're in the situation you're in. So
Yeah, not at all. And like I said, man, we'll go through our ratings for the top 30 teams, but they're for the first time in the last, probably I would say the last 2 seasons, they haven't been a top 10 team in the league. So kind of goes to show you where the Warriors are at. I would say they're, like you said, they're in a peculiar situation. They're just in the middle. They got to figure out where they're going to be. If that's, I think there's some beauty in being a Jazz or being the Hornets or the Nets, right?
right.
Like tanking, not expecting to be a championship contender, but the Warriors are in limbo because they're in the middle and they got to figure out which direction they're going to go. They're going to hit the stick, they're going to get under it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's
That's
crazy,
crazy.
man.
For
Wow,
sure.
wow.
Wow, wow. You got anything else for the people, my man?
No, man, this is a good one. Like I said, I didn't, for one, didn't realize they had so much people that they owed money to, the Warriors, that is, and just kind of the situation that they're in. Like we said, we're talking very highly of Steph Curry, as we should, and he's one of the greatest players I've seen play personally. But like I said, it kind of gives you that little bit of false hope that he could lead us to the top of the mountain again. And as with this roster, I don't believe that they can. They could make a Cinderella run per se, or upset someone or whatever it is, but if they don't play their young guys, if they don't give them run, and even if they don't sign Kuminga, man, like, yeah, it would suck being in that luxury tax, but or the second apron, my bad, but at least you have someone that you can build around for the future, and I feel like that's what they're missing as of right now. So super interesting. I appreciate your time as always, ZD. Chopping it
Oh,
up,
yeah.
and the off-season files, man. I think this was a good one. It's very intriguing to look at their books and kind of see where they're at. Going into this upcoming season.
For sure, bro. I like taking a look at it too, man. I think it gives me a background, some context into where these teams are headed next year. And we talked about a lot, bro. Bradley Beal, we went around talking about Embiid, we talked about Wemby. Did a lot today, man. So, we appreciate the audience, obviously. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We're gonna be knocking these videos out, staying consistent with it. But CJ, if that's gonna be it for you, that's it for
That's
me,
it
my
for me,
man.
man.
That's it for the boys over here at Three Man Weave. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but don't forget, we're gonna catch y'all next time, man. Peace.
Peace. Three
Three
man, three
man. Go
man.
Lakers, go Lakers.
Yeah.